Welcome to 2Cents FC. I'm your host, L. Johnson. As you can see, our brother Amobi is missing this week, but we'll hold it down for him. Each week, we'll be talking with individuals from around the soccer world, learning about their stories and getting their unfiltered thoughts and opinions. This week, we'll be going 1v1 with Dr. Jermaine Scott, who has a Ph.D. in African American Studies. He's also the founder of the Black Herons Supporters Group and co-host of Dreaming of Freedom podcast. We'll begin to know all about Jermaine, talking about his career, and learning more about what he does in the local Miami community. Jermaine, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. L. Thank you for inviting me. Really happy to be here.
Appreciate it. Definitely been wanting to talk to you for a minute. We had some big announcements this week. We'll get into that a little bit later, but definitely happy to have you on. So the first thing we do when we have a guest on the show is we ask them about when they fell in love with soccer. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I fell in love with soccer at a very early age. I'm of Jamaican descent, so soccer was always the first sport in the household. And it was just kind of a natural. It was just kind of a natural, growth with the game. So I started playing like rec soccer at like 4, and then I started playing travel soccer around 12, 13. And then in high school, I actually stopped playing to kind of focus more on a marching band, but that's that's another story. But I've always been a part of the game. When I went to Chicago to get my PhD, I would play pickup games, and there was like a really vibrant pickup community out there in Chicago. So it was good, kind of staying active, staying fit there. And then, of course, my research, which is kind of a very kind of organic, kind of gravitation towards the research. So, I look at, kind of Black soccer players and Black soccer experiences, historical experiences, and contemporary ones. And so, it's just all consuming, to be honest. So I fell in love at a very young age, and it's kind of been giving me life, ever since.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned you're of Jamaican descent. So tell us a little bit about your background. Like, what's your origin story? Like from little Jermaine all the way up to now.
Yeah, so I'm of Jamaican descent. Shout out to moms and pops. They did a great job really instilling like Jamaican culture at home. Growing up in the U.S. I was born in Florida, born and raised in West Palm Beach, Florida. Um, and yeah, and it was a cool childhood. One thing I would say is that soccer really kind of became the first informal space that I had to really ask questions about like race. I don't think I was directly asking those questions, but to be one of two Black people on the team, to be the only Black person on the team, um, like I noticed those things. Like I didn't know how to process it, but it was something that I noticed, right? And so, um, that's kind of one thing I distinctly remember about, particularly in the context of soccer. Um, yeah, so then going to high school, well, in middle school I went to an arts middle school. I played in the band, and that's kind of where my love for music really took off. And in high school I went to Suncoast Community High School. Shout out to the Chargers. And I was in the band all 4 years. And it was it was a great experience. I learned a lot of skills, and I learned a lot about myself, how to be a leader, how to be around people, right? It was a great like kind of social experience. Um, and that's also when I stopped playing soccer to kind of really focus in on the band thing. And that kind of took me to Florida A&M University up in Tallahassee. Shout out to all my HBCUs,
So
especially
you,
the Rattlers.
you remember the Marching
Uh,
100?
yes. I was in the Marching 100. I played bass drum. Uh, that was gonna be my two truths. That was probably gonna be part of my two truths. So I'm glad I'm glad we won't get to that. But yeah, so I was in the Marching 100. I played bass drum. All well, yeah. I played all 3 years. The fourth year, that's when the band got suspended
Mm.
because of hazing. So that's I don't really like talking about that,
Yeah,
but
it's a
something that
conversation.
happened, and something that yeah. It's something that we at HBCUs, it's kind of just part of the experience. Really, at any university, right? It's really kind of part of the experience. So, anyways, but yeah, so I played all 3 years. I loved it. Again, really honed in on those leadership skills and just really like learned how to interact with people from all over. Right? It was, at a university, you're gonna get people from Miami, you're gonna get people from Atlanta, you're gonna get people from Tallahassee, right? Kind of the local Tallahassee citizens. So it was cool. It was really cool. I really love my experience at FAMU and HBCU. I'm a strong supporter of HBCUs. Um, and so afterwards, I got my degree. I got my bachelor's in history from FAMU, and then I immediately went and got my PhD from Northwestern University up in Chicago, or up in Evanston, technically. Um, and that was another beautiful experience. I mean, it was probably the most intellectually rigorous experience that I've gone through. But it was good. It was really good. We lived on the south side for a little bit. Down in Bronzeville, which was just a beautiful community, a beautiful space, beautiful people. So Chicago is just a whole vibe, in itself. So I was blessed to spend 6 years there. Um, and then after that, after I got my PhD, I got a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And that was probably the wild. It was just Charlottesville is not a vibe. Or it is a vibe. It's just a very dangerous,
Right.
racist,
Right.
vibe. you know. So yeah, that was a wild experience. UVA in itself, like the department that I was in for the year, was a beautiful department. It was the African American Studies department, and it was, beautiful people. Everyone very loving and warm. But outside of those walls, outside of that department, it was just very like hostile. So it was good to kind of get out of that space. That's when we moved back to Florida, moved back to Miami, where I'm now teaching at Florida Atlantic University. The one good thing during my time in Charlottesville is that I got married to my beautiful wife. So we got married in 2019 down in Miami. So she's been with me from day one. So she's kind of the ride or die. And so we
Love it.
moved back down to Miami, where she grew up. It's kind of her childhood home. So her parents moved out uh, to Atlanta a few years ago. So now we're kind of taking over the house and starting a family. Got a 9-month-old at home, 9.5-month-old at home. So things are moving fast. Things are moving fast. I'm
I
trying to
see,
balance
man. I
everything.
see. It's
But
a
yeah,
beautiful thing.
that's kind of the origin story for sure.
It's a beautiful thing. So let's talk about your doctorate degree a little bit and how it pertains to soccer.
Yeah,
Can you kind of like
yeah,
give us some insight on that, like how your
for
studies
sure, for
kind of
sure.
kind of merge?
Yeah, when I first got to Northwestern, I wanted to do a project on like Black labor politics. I kind of wanted to follow the career of this one individual named Ewart Guinier, who was like a politician. He was a labor organizer. He was a professor. He just wore a lot of different hats. But quickly into the program, like a year and a half in, I realized that this wasn't gonna sustain me intellectually for the rest of my career.
Mhm.
Um, and so I really just kind of followed my passion, which was sports. And so at first I was kind of figuring out how to do a sport, like a general sports project. And then it was one of my advisors that said, you should really think about doing something about blackness and soccer and the diaspora. And so we kind of ran with that. And so, basically the work that I'm doing now, the work that I did at Northwestern was really looking at the different experiences of Black footballers, kind of really throughout the 20th century across the African diaspora. So I'm looking at a Black soccer team in the 1920s and 30s and 40s in New York called the Falcons, a really dope team made up of like World War I vets and World War II vets, over time, all from the Caribbean, all from Africa, all Black players, like one of the few Black teams playing up in New York. They're based in Harlem, so it's just a kind of a beautiful little story there out of Harlem. So I go from Harlem, then I go to Howard University in the 1970s, where they win the NCAA championship in soccer in '71 and '74. Then I hop down to Brazil, where I look at a club in Sao Paulo, Corinthians Football Club, and during the '80s they have the Corinthians Democracy, which was a beautiful kind of democratic experiment that the club went through, led by a number of different players, including Socrates, who's kind of famous for captaining the Brazil side in the 1986 World Cup or 1984 World Cup. Don't quote me on that. It's 1980, 1984. No, 1986, 1986. And so what I'm looking at in that particular project is how the black players kind of organized themselves and kind of what were their politics during that project. So I'm looking at two players, Vladimir Rodriguez dos Santos and Zé Maria, two Afro-Brazilian footballers who one of them, Zé Maria, gets in like formal politics. He joins like the city council, and Vladimir, he's like creating a dance school, like a ballet school, right? And he's like teaching, well, not him, but he brings in like dance teachers where he's talking about capoeira, and he's talking about ballet and jazz, and how like all of this training helps his performance on the pitch. And so I'm figuring out kind of what they're doing and how they're bringing in this kind of African diasporic culture into the game. And then I go to the Netherlands, where I'm talking about the 1990s Netherlands team, kind of this cohort of black players like Edgar Davids and Clarence Seedorf and Patrick Kluivert, Vincent Bogard, and kind of how they kind of really challenge some of the media's perceptions of them. Right, the kind of the Dutch media at the time perceive them as kind of being bratty, or being like young stars from the streets, right? And they're like, no, we're players, and you're not going to treat us differently, right? And so I'm kind of looking at this moment where they kind of take a stand against the media, but also the coaches at the time that like they thought they were being discriminated against. And so I look at that, and then I end uh, the book that I'm writing. I end the book with
I was just
a
about to say, this
history
sounds
of.
like a book right here.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just kind of going through my chapters in my head. It's, everything is just it's just all over right now. Sorry, but the last chapter of the book is looking at the history of women's football in Jamaica. And so I look at the history of women's football in Jamaica, really starting in the late 1960s. I bring it up to the early 1990s, and then I finish it with looking at the Reggae Girls strike back in following the 2019 World Cup, when they striked against the Jamaican Football Federation. So that's kind of the whole scope of the project. And so, but the kind of main thrust is this kind of diasporic framing, where I'm looking at football in all of these different spaces and seeing how black people are responding to the game. How the game essentially becomes a space for black politics.
That's dope. That seems like a really like fun area to study as well. Like, kind of
Yeah.
merging your passion for the sport as well as history and tying things in. That's like
Yes.
when they say like your passion is like a job, or your job isn't a job because it's something that you love. Like, I think
Exactly.
that's I could like feel and hear your passion as you're explaining everything, and definitely looking forward to reading this book too, man. It sounds super dope.
Yeah, yeah. I need to write it. It's kind of drafted up. It's drafted
Okay.
up. It's like 90% of my dissertation, and so I'm just kind of adding a new chapter and kind of adding two new chapters and cleaning everything up. So hopefully it's out. My goal is that it's out before the next World Cup, so it kind of picks up that steam and all of that. But
For
yeah, that's the goal,
2022
man.
or
For
2026?
2026, 2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's the goal. That's the goal.
All right. So you mentioned that you're a professor at FAU. Like, what do you teach there? Tell us about your kind of day to day experience there and like what things you're
Yeah.
teaching.
Yeah. So I'm my official title is an assistant professor of African American history at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. And I teach African American history both before and after 1877. So kind of the history of slavery and the history of really the 20th century African American history. Those are two different classes. And then I teach African diaspora history. I teach American sports history. I've taught a couple of different grad courses on like the Black radical tradition and American history. So But my main courses are those African American history courses and the African diaspora history courses.
Okay, dope, dope. What are we touched on your book already, but what are some like Black historical soccer moments that really resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, well, me personally, I mean, we can talk about the book. I mean, I think all of those chapters are kind of very important moments to know as kind of this Black soccer history, because they're all moments that you have Black teams, right, or Black collective, as kind of how I'm trying to conceptualize it, kind of these Black athletic collectives, rather than just kind of individual athletes. We're talking about more than one, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
what happens when more like this collective really starts to fight back and talk back, to the system that they feel is treating them discriminatory, and so I think all of those moments are important. For me personally, the first moment that stands out is like the 1998 World Cup. Seeing the Netherlands team, right? I remember vividly, right, seeing Edgar Davids with the locks, with the goggles, and I'm like, whoa, like who is this Black guy? Like balling, like just running up and down, right? And so the Dutch team always kind of held this kind of fascinating team in my head, right? But then of course France, right, it was also a very diasporic team. And then of course 1998 was the first time and only time the Jamaican men's team made it to the World Cup, right? So it's a very distinct kind of moment in my head. Also, thinking about like Mario Balotelli, right? Like his kind of famous celebrations. Like these, I think these are the type of moments that I'm interested in. Are like
Mm-hmm.
moments that we wouldn't expect, right? Certain celebrations that we wouldn't expect. Um, of course, there's a history of anti-racist politics in European football. We can date that back to the early 1990s. Where they're talking about kick it out, where they're talking about equality and anti-racism slogans, right? Rude Gullit, right,
Mm-hmm.
of the Netherlands, he dedicates his Ballon d'Or to Nelson Mandela, right, at the height of apartheid, right, and so these are also moments, right, where I'm, of course, the contemporary moment, right, where the Premier League is still taking a knee. I'm not sure how long that's going to continue, right? But
Yeah.
the fact that they have committed to do that, at least what maybe 2.5 seasons now, and just seeing more individual Black footballers, coming out and to Raheem Sterling, um, Romelu Lukaku, right? Kind of all of these players that are starting to speak out and kind of tell their stories. I think those are the moments that I'm most interested in, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my mind is racing right now. The content creator in me is like tons of ideas
Yes,
happening
yes,
right now.
yes,
So
yes,
definitely, I'm definitely gonna tap in with you
yes, for sure.
offline about some of those things because I think those are some really dope stories that may have been told, but like may not have been told in depth, or people may not have like a full depth of them. So
Right, right.
definitely, we definitely gonna circle back on that
Yes, sir.
one.
Yes, sir.
So you're down in Miami, and lover of the game. I know you're an Inter Miami fan, but you also started a supporters group for Inter Miami.
Yes,
So what inspired you to found the Black Herons?
yes. So what inspired me were, to be completely honest, were the existing Black supporter groups and just kind of the existing Black soccer culture that I felt like was emerging within the last 5, 6, 7 years. Well, I mean, we can really, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's dating back from Footy Mob, right, in Atlanta. Like once they came on the scene, it's like, oh wow, right? There's there's a Black supporter group, right? A supporter group that is centering and prioritizing Black culture. And then of course we saw it with Chicago with Black Fires. We saw it at Forward Madison with Featherstone Flamingos, New Mexico United with Black Diamonds, Rose Room Collective with DC United and the Washington Spirit. So it was just you could tell something was happening, and then on top of that you had the whole podcast scene, which was of course you guys, it was Shea Butter, it was For the Culture, it was just nonstop. Can I Kick It, right? It was just nonstop content, like whoa. um and it wasn't just content for content's sake, right? It was actually there was a message behind all of it, right? This kind of culture verse, right? I love that. It's just it was something was building, right? And so um, I kind of wanted to see what the scene was like in Miami, and so you know, just to be clear, I've been a fan of Miami soccer from the Miami Fusion days, right? People
Mm,
recently people have started to come out like, who is this guy? Like, where did you come from, right? So I've been a fan of Miami soccer since the Miami Fusion days, right? Now I may have just recently entered this official supporter group scene, but to me, what was happening was that the club seemed to be doing a great job of marketing the club as a club for the Latin American community. Now, in
mm,
the context of U.S. soccer, I love that, right? Because U.S. soccer is largely marketed as a white sport, right? And
right.
so when we have spaces like the Cultureverse, right, when we have clubs kind of tapping into other communities other than the kind of white American community, I'm all for it, right? The problem to me was that that is not the entirety of the Miami and South Florida experience. And I felt like the club was missing a potential opportunity to tap into those already soccer loving communities, right? It's not like you're trying to convince these communities to love the game, right? You're talking about Jamaicans who love the game, Haitians that love the game, Trinidadians that love the game, right? And so back in 2021, um, I started kind of reaching out to different members on Twitter. I just started seeing like black people on Twitter talking about Inter Miami, and I would just reach out to them like, "Hey, like, what do you think about starting like this black supporter group for Inter Miami?" And they were with it, right? And so some of these members were, Kolya Barnes, shout out to Kolya, AD Bradley, who's a producer for the podcast, um, Blaine, shout out to Blaine, so a lot of these members, Alex Windley, who is doing great reporting work for Inter Miami. She's just the bomb. So a lot of these members, we kind of all kind of started this together, right? We created the name Black Herons together. We created the mission statement together. So it was very much of a collaborative effort. Um, and again, we all shared the idea that the club needs to do a better job of creating a space for, right, the kind of black communities that exist in South Florida. And so we kind of said, whatever, instead of waiting for the club to do that, let's just do that ourselves, right? And we already kind of knew of the existing culture around US soccer, right? As we talked about the culture verse before, right? So we already knew there was an infrastructure that existed that we can kind of, tap into, contribute to, kind of give our own Miami experience to. And I think what's different about Miami is what I was saying about before, is that it's not this kind of black versus white, right? It's not white U.S. soccer versus black U.S. soccer, right? It's and it's not even a versus. I don't even want to put it. I don't even want to set it up like versus, right? But it's more of a there's a deep passion and a deep commitment to market to the Latin American communities, but you could also show that same commitment to the black communities, right, in Miami. And so we just wanted to highlight that, right? And so I don't think that's the case in a place like Chicago, right, where the soccer scene is very, it's marketed as very white, right? Or so it's kind of how the game is marketed in different areas that I think makes Miami unique, right, or Inter Miami unique.
Yeah, for sure. We all know, we've heard stories about supporter culture in America and how complicated it can be at times, whether it's dealing with the team, whether it's dealing with other supporters groups. Um, what have been some of the highlights around creating the group, but also what have been some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the highlights have been creating that space, creating the community. And even if it's not like in person, right? It's not like we have 100 members showing up to games. It's not like we have 50 members showing up to games. You probably, whatever. We have small, modest numbers, right? But it's the community that we're creating, whether it's on WhatsApp, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram. We're creating a space where people can engage with the club, right? Can engage with Black Miami culture, and still engage with the game, right? It's about the game, but it's also about representation in the game. So that's been the biggest highlight, just kind of creating that space. We also did a lot of work with local clubs, in particular Little Haiti FC, which is an incredible grassroots, non-pay to play club, and these kids are ballers. Like they're not like it's not some charity kid, right? Like they are out here balling. Okay, so doing work with them, right? Whether that's in the case of donating waters for a scrimmage, donating soccer balls, right, just for the for the players. Um, we started a GoFundMe for them so they can participate in this international soccer tournament in St. Lucia, right? And so, just doing things like that, kind of tapping into that community. We're trying to do more and more. We're trying to do a couple of other things that we've got planned. We don't want to give it out yet, but stay tuned for that. We want to do something around tailgating, right? What is tailgating? What is kind of this Black Miami tailgating experience look like? So one big thing is like this, Auntie Mary's rum punch that we kind of keep, promoting, like, so it's, so like we want to like bring in different pieces of our cultures, right? We want to bring in Jamaican culture, we want to bring in Trinidadian culture, we want to bring in Haitian culture, right? And kind of see what that brings us into a tailgate. Some other highlights would just be kind of like getting merch, right? Just like simple things like getting merch and just like being able to to get those things, and then represent, right? But then some of the downfalls, some of the disappointing things, I guess, about being part of supporter group culture, and I don't want to say it's specific or unique to Inter Miami. I'm hearing more and more it's widespread. Is this concept of gatekeeping, right? It's who are you new guys on the block, right? You guys are just coming out of nowhere, you're trying to call shots. um so there's a lot of gatekeeping, right? There's just a lot of gatekeeping, right? I'll just put it at that. And so that's been a struggle, right? Kind of our response is like, listen, we're an independent supporter group, right? We're not an official supporter group. Um, so all the hoops and loops that you want us to do and want us to jump through, we're not gonna do that, right? Because we're independent. We're gonna move how we want to move. Um, and so yeah, so I think there's just a little like confusion about who we are, right? Like why we exist, right? Like when we first came out, there was like you know this supporter group is based off of race. I think that's kind of divisive, and why does it have to be? And it's like, that's not what it's about, right? Like there are supporter groups of Inter Miami, official supporter groups of Inter Miami, that if you go onto their websites right now, they explicitly say we are rooting our experience in the Latin American football experience. They explicitly say that, right? That's not political, right? So like no one's coming to them saying, hey, that's political, right? But as soon as a black supporter group says we want to root our experiences in black culture, then it's divisive and it's political. So those are the types of conversations that we have to have sometimes with other supporter groups or other members, or other people on social media. um but we just try to stay the course. We just try to continue to show up, as our good friend DJ Aero told us in episode 1. It's just like, you just have to show up, you just have to keep showing up. And so that's what we're gonna do, right? So it's disappointing, but again, we're not really too concerned about what the club thinks or what other supporter groups think. It's like, as long as we're doing the work, as long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, tapping into the community, building that space. um, that's why we exist. So it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, there's a threat in our unity. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
there's always going to
absolutely.
be some pushback when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
unfortunately.
and I definitely need to try Auntie Mary's rum punch. I didn't get a chance to try it while you guys were down in Atlanta, so definitely looking
Yes, sir.
forward to that.
Yes,
Um,
sir. Yes, sir.
but let's get into the podcast side of things. So you guys recently started a podcast called Dreaming of Freedom.
Yep.
And spoiler alert, if you've been paying attention to the timeline, they're part of the 2 Cents FC family,
Yep.
part of the
Yep.
Cultureverse. So
Yep.
welcome,
Yep.
happy to
Thank
have
you.
y'all.
Thank you.
Tell us how the podcast started. Talk about what you guys will be talking about, and the premises around it.
Yeah. So the the whole, I guess I'll start with the name. The name Dreaming of Freedom started actually with the club, right? So the club's phrase is actually called freedom to dream, right? And so It's a pretty phrase that kind of thinks about the possibilities of what we can dream of as a club. And so as a black supporter group, we wanted to kind of flip that and say, okay, well, we want to say dreaming of freedom, um, to represent two things. The first thing is, it represents dreaming of freedom, dreaming of literally Miami Freedom Park, which is supposed to represent the club, which is supposed to represent football, right? Which is supposed to represent freedom, right? We're dreaming of freedom. But then also dreaming of freedom is to represent the histories of Black freedom struggles, right? Or just freedom struggles in general. Um, and so so that's where the name came about, Dreaming of Freedom. And then we just thought, we might as well just turn this into a podcast where we can talk about historical and contemporary events that have political meaning, that have deep kind of cultural meaning, and kind of open that up and kind of see where we can go with those stories. So a lot of episodes will be about kind of historical events. Other episodes will be about current events and kind of tapping into the history of that current event, right? Like the history of the present, if you will. So that's kind of the structure. We're gonna have interviews. Hopefully, most episodes will have interviews. Our first episode, we interviewed Footy Mob from Atlanta. Great people, Reggie and Aero. So that's yeah, that's kind of the vision, and it's really again inspired by the existing network, the existing 2 Cents network, the existing Black kind of culture podcast, right? It's just the Black Footy podcast, right? Where it's everyone's doing an incredible job. So we just wanted to tap into that space and again provide a little uh, Miami, Miami flair, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you guys haven't checked out their first episode yet, definitely make sure you tap into that. Got more good stuff coming from them. Definitely excited about, where you guys are going to take the show. And happy to be, involved and happy to be able to support any way that we can. So,
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
definitely we got your back. We're behind you on that.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. So let's jump into some fun stuff, some rapid fire questions that I got here. First one, what is one interesting fact about yourself that most people wouldn't know?
One interesting fact would be that I have a twin brother. Maybe most people don't know that. I have a twin brother. It's not identical, but yeah, I have a twin brother. Yeah, Jeremy. Shout out to Jeremy. He's out there he's actually out there in the Bay Area. He just moved out there to Oakland
Oh, word.
a couple of weeks ago.
Dope, dope. That's what's up. I have to get Jeremy tapped in.
Yeah, for sure.
To what we doing with the Town FC.
Yeah.
All right. So you being Jamaican, you having a Caribbean background, but also being down in Miami. What's on your pre-match / tailgate playlist?
Ooh. Um. Wow. Okay. So definitely a lot of Trick Daddy. I'll say that. Definitely a lot of Trick Daddy. Um. A lot of reggae. Like me personally, I wouldn't say this for the actual tailgate experience, but me personally, like I listen to a lot of reggae just kind of throughout the house, or if I'm like working, like doing like physical labor, I'll listen to reggae music a lot. But to the tailgate, yeah, it's just like a lot of Miami music. So like Miami is known for not only this like bass sound, which we can kind of date back to like Uncle Luke and kind of that early '90s scene, but more in the early 2000s, we can look at kind of this juke style, right, where it's like juking music, and so we could think of like groups like Grind Mode, I'm So High, or Ecstasy, all of these like what we call juking music or bopping music. You know, if the listeners to the pod, go onto YouTube and type in like juking and bopping South Florida, they'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, anything around that sound we're playing. Yeah, of course, reggae. We want to get more like Haitian influence into like the tailgate experience, into Black Herons. We have a couple of Haitian members. We have one member who does a lot of great work with Little Haiti FC. He runs their Instagram page, but we want to kind of get more of that kind of Haitian culture into the scene. But yeah, so I'd say reggae and really like Florida music, right? Like really just like we want to hone in on that Florida music. So anything from Florida, Trick Daddy, Trina, Grind Mode, anything like that, Uncle Luke, right? Anything like that.
Yeah, for sure, as it should be, right? Last one. What's your favorite off work activity?
Ooh, what's my favorite off work activity? Man, man. I don't do I don't do a lot of activities off work, especially now with this kid. The last the last 9.5 months has been work and then no play. But I would say if I have the time, like I'll definitely pull out my little keyboard and try and make a little beat here and there, and try and put together some type of song. So I've been trying to produce from my high school days, and so that's a little hobby that I like to do every now and then. But I just need to find the time because it takes a lot of time for me to kind of figure all that out. But yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. Time is definitely scarce these days to be able to take some time for yourself and chill out and just
Yes.
relax. So
Yes.
I definitely understand you there,
Yes.
especially on the kids side. So
Yes, man. For real.
for sure.
For real.
Well, that's our show, Jermaine. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Where can people find you? Where can people find Black Herons?
Yes.
Dreaming of Freedom on the internet?
Yes. So you can find me on Twitter at Black Soccer Doc. Just spell it exactly how it sounds. You can find Black Herons at Black Herons UTD at Black Herons United, right? UTD. That's on Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, it's Freedom Dream at Freedom Dreams BH, and on Instagram, it's at I believe it's at Dreaming of Freedom Pod. I believe it's at Dreaming of Freedom Pod. But if you type in Dreaming of Freedom, I'm sure it'll come up. But yeah, so yeah, that's where you can find me.
We'll have all of that in the show notes as well. So
Bet.
make it easy to link and follow them. Definitely tap in with them. They're doing great work over there.
Thank you.
That's our show for this week. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us get discovered. Follow us on the socials at 2Cents FC Show. And then tweet us your comments on the show. Any topics you want us to discuss. Yeah, be sure to tap in. If you are a part of our Patreon, definitely tap in with us there. You have the opportunity to ask our show hosts, our show guests questions, get early access to episodes, and a lot of other cool content and stuff. So definitely tap in with us on Patreon as well. But until next week, peace out.